All right. We're moving pretty good now, although we're only on section 4, financing. So financing. Financing means something. And it's important for you to help your buyers understand financing means something. So if financing contingency is selected on page 1, which is probably going to be the most frequently checked off box, their obligation to close, remember their obligation to close in this is also automatically subject to the appraisal contingency in section 5, which we'll get to next. And it says that it's contingent upon them applying for or for qualifying for financing on the terms and the rate or better as set forth in section 1, which is the same type of input you have today, and the following. So these are 2 really important principles. The first one is, I told you a new definition we have, the buyer has to apply for a loan before the loan application date set forth in 1. Now, so this means there is a date by which a buyer has to apply for a loan application. I'll come back to talk about what that means. And it says they have to take reasonable steps to pursue loan approval. Failure to apply for that shall constitute a breach and be subject to the termination rights in section 10C, which we'll get to. And buyers shall keep seller informed of the status and progress of the loan, including notifying seller within 24 hours of the loan application being submitted. So what does it mean to apply for a loan up in 4A? How many buyers sign the loan application the day they go in and apply for the loan? Probably like 0, right? Like how many of you all are signing the loan application like after they've signed the deed at closing because the loan officer says, oh, by the way, I got to have one more piece of document signed? It happens all the time. That's probably the common result is the lender comes to closing, they've got all the information in the application, but they haven't signed the application. This doesn't say they have to sign the application. This says they just have to apply for it, and at the end, they have to notify the seller. Why do they do that? So the seller knows the buyer is going forward in good faith to actually pursue a loan. And if this is not done, you'll see later on in the section for breach, the seller can send the buyer notice that says, you haven't applied for your loan, you got 5 days to cure that. All right. And if they don't, then there's another remedy to the seller. The goal here is there's a date by which the buyer has to move forward and do stuff and actually apply. Could there be a fight over what the word apply means? Yes. But most people are going to understand what that means to apply for, which is to submit to a loan officer enough information that the loan officer believes he has an application to move forward with and seek approval from however he does, whatever his bank does, whether it's a loan committee or they have internal approval up to a certain amount. Every lender is different. So we're not specifically saying everything has to be done. We're saying you have to apply for it by the date. You have an obligation to pursue the loan with reasonable good faith, and you have an obligation to notify seller that you've done that. However, and this is important, 4B, this is the buyer's right on this. If buyer does not obtain a loan approval to buyer's satisfaction on or before the end of the inspection period, that period is becoming really important, buyer may terminate the contract pursuant to section 10A. So this means, everybody's like drawing arrows back and forth, if the buyer doesn't get financing for any reason, they can terminate for any reason they want to up to the inspection period. So it's really important when you're determining the inspection period that you're figuring out inspection period is the date the buyer gets to walk away, get the earnest money back, and have no more obligations. So you need to make sure it's enough time to get any of the inspections done and the financing done. That makes sense. So it's what? It's simple, but the buyer has every right in the world to terminate, which is, I think, the goal. Buyer has to do something. Buyer's obligated to do something by a date, but the buyer can still get out for any reason they want. Now, there are also ways that you can contract around this. So again, we're promulgating a form for people to use. And if you all decide as a seller's agent, you don't want there to be an open-ended section like this, you're always welcome to do a different addendum or to use a different form of contract. This is just the form that we have walked through multiple revisions and at its exhaustive conversations regarding the policy decisions under where we want the contract to be, sort of all the way through from beginning to end.